Okay.
Alright, so welcome to the second of this two-part lecture series on how to score an A for argumentative essay. In our previous episode, we did refer to the various components of ideation and planning. And we also referred to thesis statements and topic sentences. Furthermore, we also covered introductions and paragraphing and expression. Right? Next is, I would argue, again, another crucial component in your essay that can really make or break it. And that, of course, would be the counter-paragraph. Now, the counter-paragraph is one of those segments of the essay that many candidates simply neglect because they think it's not important to cover the other side, when actually, it's really what makes it convincing. So we'll be looking at that in detail. And of course, we're looking at conclusions. How do we end off the essay with a bang? Because previously we spoke of beginning the essay with a bang, right? We're going to entice the reader in. We're going to say, bang, yes, we want the reader to read it. But then how do we want the reader to leave having read the essay? How do we want the reader to be perhaps intellectually or emotionally affected by having read your essay? These are the questions we're going to be pursuing. And of course, editing. Now, editing is one of those steps that can help to really polish your essay off, right? To give it that nice finish. Think of your essay almost as a kind of raw diamond, right? It's like a gem that hasn't really yet been polished. So we want to make sure we give it an extra sheen and shine so that your essay can really stand out, right? And of course, we've got our Q&A, because yesterday, with our audience here, we've got some very insightful questions. And this has been raised for our benefit, I would say. So let's address it together, right? What is it that we can learn to perfect, to improve, to really augment our skills in argumentative writing? So let's look at our counter-paragraph, right? Let's start off with a nice and simple video. Let's see how we can learn some of these techniques and what counter-paragraphs really entail.
You need to show both sides of the argument in your essay. The counter-paragraph is where you recognise any valid point disagreeing with your opinion. Presenting the opposing argument and then answering it in your rebuttal strengthens your argument because it shows you have considered more than one opinion. So how do we do this? Think about your audience, not your supporters, but people who might disagree with you. Why would someone argue with your point? Why would they disagree with you? Start your counter-paragraph with a linking word such as however, as this connects it to the paragraph before and lets the reader know this is an opposing point. Here are some other linking words and phrases that you could use to start this paragraph. Consider the opposing argument to acknowledge and anticipate any doubts that your reader might have.
Now remember, that's the key phrase, isn't it? You want to anticipate any possible argument that your reader might have. Imagine you've got this big crowd of people, right? All antagonistic, all looking at your argument and thinking, not quite sure really. Right? How are you going to convert them? You're going to have to turn them to your side, right? And that's a tall order. But one way you can do it, right? And this is one of the basic skills that some theorists like Dale Carnegie, for example, have posited. They said that always think how the other person might feel. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. Essentially, that is the true key of human relations. I would say that applies not just in terms of argumentative essays, that applies in terms of life, right? Always put yourself in the other person's shoes and think about what is life like? What is their point of view? And from there, we adapt the way we relate to their argument, right? So, for example, all right, let's pause this, right? And go on to the next part, right? Okay, so now, the counter-paragraph. That would be either the first or the last body paragraph. We normally recommend the last. That's quite standard, right? Because the body paragraph really provides that sense of substance. And the last body paragraph will give it that oomph, right? If you start it in terms of the first one, that's possible. Yeah, you might have seen examples of that. It depends on how it's done. For example, you might want to clear the reader's doubts first and say, okay, now that that's been dealt with, yeah, we're trying to say it's out of the way actually, then, okay, how do we proceed on from there? Yeah? So we want to be looking at that sense of substance. Right, now it comprises two parts, and one of them, of course, is the counter-argument. So you need to acknowledge or anticipate how your opponents will argue against you. So the fundamental question is, of course, why would they disagree with you? Yeah? So your counter-argument is just a few sentences long, really not that much to really elaborate upon, because the next part is crucial. Many people just give one whole load of counter-arguments. Oh yes, I'm so clever and sophisticated, I've got this other side. And then they end off, therefore, I think my side is right, the other is wrong. No, it doesn't quite make sense like that. Because if you just argue the other way around, yeah, you need to link it back, right? So linking back involves your rebuttal. You need to respond to your opponents with evidence, yeah? And that rebuttal has to be longer. Logically speaking, it must. Yeah? It has to be more convincing than the counter-argument. Because if not, then why can't we just side with the counter-argument? Yeah? And this counter-argument and your rebuttal, when combined, is going to give you that wonderful counter-paragraph. Yeah? Altogether, remember, let's use signposts, let's use linking words to connect all these sentences together. Yeah? So that it flows, so that you're maintaining that consistent stand. You're not deviating from your path. You're right on track, right on the ball, and you know you're going to propel your argument forward. Right? So let's look at possible counter paragraphs. Yeah? We want to be introducing it with phrases. Yeah? Standard phrases. For example, it should be acknowledged that, there has been the case that, or it is true that, or it may be argued that. All of these phrases help to indicate to the reader that, hello, this is my counter argument within the counter paragraph. Yeah? And then there are other ways to do it. We could say some may assume that, some may believe that. So notice these phrases distance you from that plane even further. It really depends on the exact argument you're making. You can choose which phrase you want. Yeah? But it should be somewhere along these lines. Besides that, you could also even specify what the counter-argument is, even within the sentence, yeah? In brief. So, proponents of, insert name of counter-argument, may counter that, so on and so forth, right? So that's in terms of your counter-argument. But what about your rebuttal? Because surely that's more important, yeah? So your rebuttal has to begin with phrases like, having said this, however, it should be noted that, and then you bring it in, right? This is when your cannons are at the ready and saying, you are going to be firing those salvos. That's a wonderful term. Yes. Okay, you're going to be firing those salvos back. You've got your ammunition at the ready, and here you are. You're going to demolish all those opponents' arguments with a single flourish. Right? So that's what you want to be doing in terms of your rhetorical effect. Yeah, I don't literally mean, like you write, oh, I hate you, opponents, and so on, right? Please, let's be civil in our discourse. Yeah? You might put it in terms of, nevertheless, it remains the case that, or, yet this argument is misleading, yet I will counter that. So all these are various ways. If the argument isn't actually misleading, then don't say it's misleading. Instead, you might say, it should be noted that, or it has to be acknowledged that, because you are saying it is quite true, right? So if we're looking at, say, the instance of the counter-paragraph that we were analyzing, or rather trying to improve, do we remember from our previous session? Right? So if you've written an improved version, right? Remember the B grade paragraph in our previous session. Some say that money makes us bad people. That one. Yeah? Yeah. By a show of hands, who found it difficult? Who found it difficult? Quite, rather. Okay, who found it, okay, I can handle this. This is easy. We've got this. Who's confident like that? Okay, it looks like more people are finding it a bit challenging. Is that the case? What is it, Jing Chen? Because we are? No, Jing Chen, you can't say because we are B grade. No, that's not the attitude, is it? Right? Instead, what do we do? If we know, okay, maybe I'm feeling that, yes, I'm not quite ready to phrase it in such fashion just yet. I always speak in terms of yet. I never speak in terms of never. Yeah? It's always a matter of progress. We're looking at our writing, and it's never static. Writing is a dynamic process. I have said this before and I will say it again. There is no such thing as a perfect writer. It's all about building skills which you accumulate over a lifetime. Right? So even the best writers, if you're writing for the New York Times, you're writing for the Economist, all of them still have something to learn. Yeah? Some of us are at different levels on the spectrum, of course. But by and large, I would say, teacher, we can build on our own self-confidence, right? So I'd say we are potential A-grade students. Think of yourself as that. You need to go home at night and say, I'm a potential A-grade student, I'm a potential grade. You've got to think of yourself as that, right? Yeah, so on, right? Now, let's look at your sample. Look at your own samples in outside the context of this lecture series. If you wish to show me those paragraphs, you may. We'll be very happy to have a look. But otherwise, have a look at it yourself first. Right? Take it out, have a look at it, and look at the sample that's provided. Now, there has been a handout, right? And you will notice that the fourth paragraph of that essay, Annex 2, is a possible sample. Let's have a look at how it's structured. How does it compare to yours? So if we look at the piece, yeah? We know, what are we supposed to put in the beginning of the counter paragraph?
Linking words.
Yes, linking words. And these linking words are going to bring in your which component? Yes, your counter argument, right? Your counter argument in which you anticipate your opponent's response, right? Do note it in the text, yeah? So that you can see how the argument progresses. Looking at Annex 2, right? Some may claim that money tempts us to be morally corrupt because it gives rise to greed. So notice, compared with the previous version, how is this different?
More professional.
More professional in what sense, teacher? Sorry, Beryl? Better vocab. For example? Morally corrupt, yes. So we're specifying the exact nature of this corruption, right? Moral corruption. And what was it? What was the other word? Tempt, right? Is that what's to tempt? Right? It's almost as if you're baiting people, right? Like there's some object of temptation, in this case money. Yes? So that's quite clear, isn't it? And then we look at the next part. Admittedly, there is some truth in the observation that some well-off individuals have been blinded by their hopes for greater riches, to the extent that they have neglected their loved ones or sacrificed their relationships in their pursuit of material prosperity. So notice, this entire portion is giving credence to the idea that, well, the opponents have a point. Yes, I mean, money does lead to evil in some senses. Well, it's true in some ways. And what word might signal this in terms of linking words? Which word? Admittedly, that's right? So we're looking at the term admittedly. And what's the function of that? What are you trying to say?
Yes.
Like you're saying, yes, actually in some ways that's quite true. Exactly, right? You are admitting, you're conceding that something is the case. And that's a very clever strategy, especially if that case is to some extent right. Yeah, can you make a note of that? Yes, it's the idea of conceding something. And then it continues, right? You want the next portion. And what's the next portion, of course? In terms of the structure of a counter paragraph. Yes, you must have your rebuttal, right? So you want that rebuttal. Now here comes the defense of the argument. Having said this, however, you can just imagine that. Having said this, however, it should be noted that you are telling the reader that, well, here comes my part now. It should be noted that money per se is still not to blame because greed and avarice can still arise even without a desire for affluence. So what does that mean, for example? Money per se is still not to blame. What's per se? In itself. Excellent, Adeline. Right? So we want to be noting that, yes, in itself, right? By itself, money per se. So what does that tell me about the candidate? If they use terms like per se. It reveals a level of sophistication that isn't out of place. It's not, they're not trying to use the term per se just to impress or show off. Hey, I can use the word. No. No, on the contrary, it's because it's use appropriate. Yeah? Because we've used the term by itself, perhaps previously in the essay. Yeah? Now, am I saying you need to get stuck? Oh, okay, I'm trying to think of a word to replace by itself, but I can't think of it, therefore I'm not going to continue writing the essay. No. Please do not get paralyzed in the middle of the exam. instead what you should do is, see, I'm not quite sure now. You write it first, write by itself or whatever first. As long as it makes grammatical sense and it's semantically correct, more or less, that's fine, you move on. You can always replace it later, right? But by and large, as you practice, as you read more, as you're exposed to all these sources, you will naturally be able to fit in all these A1-worthy words and phrases appropriately and with great finesse. Yeah? So, what are the words? What are the words of notice in this? Sorry? Avarice. What's avarice? Huh? Desire. Is it positive or negative connotations? Negative. It's not just desire. Desire is rather neutral. You can desire the good of society. But avarice is not, is it? Any questions for that? Oh, you're thinking about the words, is it? Right? Right. So, avarice, that sense of, yes, extreme greed. Yes, it's almost like the sin of avarice. Right? That's another term we could have employed. Remember that process in which we were trying to develop ideas based on the question? All those words now come into play. They fit themselves in like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle.
Gluttonous.
A gluttonous. Well, okay, then we could fit it in somewhere else, maybe. Yeah? But the idea of gluttony, because gluttony suggests what? You're a glutton after what object? Food, alright? That would be more appropriate in terms of food. Do we see that? Yeah? So let's not just replace words for the sake of replacing them. Yeah? If you're gluttonous, unless you're using that metaphorically, in which you have to really phrase it properly. Yeah? Right. So now, if we're looking at the continuation of the rebuttal, yeah, you're going to have a few parts. Remember always evidence and explanation, evidence and implication. That's so crucial in order for it to flow. So you might say, well, there have been cases, for instance, of Hollywood celebrities who have had sordid extramarital affairs due to their lust and covetousness for other spouses. Now, imagine if you just introduce this piece of evidence, yeah? Do you see how it's an improvement rather than saying greedy for others' wives? Because that's rather strange, isn't it? Greedy, huh? What do you mean by that? Right? Yeah? But lust, that's very specific. In other words, can we have evil in society without money? Yes. In this case, all you need is the human heart, because evil resides in it. Good also resides in it. It depends on which side you want to triumph.
Join the dark side.
Yes? No, teacher, we won't join the dark side. No. Right? That's precisely what I want to avoid. Yeah? Okay, but notice even these terms. Now, what the words stand out? What words stand out here? Sordid. What's sordid? What's sordid, I wonder?
Arousing moral.
Yeah, the sense of, there's something about moral sentiments that it suggests, right? There's something. Another sordid, literally meaning dirty. I mean, sordid. But more than that, here it's not really dirty in the physical sense. It's dirty in the moral sense, right? It's the idea of moral corruption. Yeah. So indeed, the sense of that which is immoral, which is dishonorable, sordid, yeah, until it stains the character. It results in a blemish on the soul. We might even say so. Do you see how all these terms naturally arise if you're thinking about these phrases? Yeah. What other words stand out in the passage? Covetousness. Is that what you were saying? I notice some of us may have seen some of these words before, and then we're looking at it and we're thinking, how do we say it again? Yes, so covetous. So let's just remember covetousness. Yes. What does it mean to be covetous?
To want someone.
To want something. Yeah, it takes something that belongs to someone else. Right? So it can be referring to objects or referring to something depending on which entities you choose to describe. Yes. Again, the sense of greed, a strong desire to possess, especially to possess that which is not yours. Right? So do we see how, for example, going after other people's spouses is really not the thing to do? Yeah? Now, so that is implicit even in the sentence, and yet you're not putting it in such a banal fashion. Right? Based on this piece of evidence, can we just leave it? Let's just end the paragraph. We've written enough. You know? Can we just end it? Yeah? Or I don't feel like continuing. There's some candidates who just do that. I just don't feel like it. No. Right? It's not about what we feel like doing. Okay? It's based on what is appropriate for the task at hand. Yeah? In this case, we know we have to add on something. What might be that which we should add on?
Elaboration.
Yeah, some sort of, perhaps an inference or a link. Do we see that? We want that kind of inference. We might say, based on this, well, what can we say based on this example? Because given that all these acts of adultery, for example, might occur, right, even without money, yeah, and the way we behave in a way is based on how we choose to live, isn't it? Yeah? So let's try to phrase it in a fashion. We might say, okay, yes, indeed, moral character is determined by individual choice. So that might be a way of summarizing the point. We are crystallizing it in such fashion that it is plain for the reader to see. Now, what are we noticing about this? Does it seem difficult? Quite a bit, right? But that's precisely the kind of process we want to be practicing. And over time, it's going to get easier and easier, right? Because imagine if you added another salvo, pa-pum, next piece, right? We have adding more ammunition, and we're going to fire the next piece of evidence, and we're going to say, aha, see? Remember those philanthropists, Tham Singh and so on? Remember how previously we talked about Ganesh Singh who built schools? Yeah? All the philanthropists mentioned earlier did not become selfish or miserly when they amassed their wealth. Rather, they chose to use their financial resources wisely for the benefit of others. So this piece of evidence then allows us to give the next inference. And then what can we say? Because they chose to use their money wisely. There are many rich people out there who are rather generous. That's the basic point. But we want to put it in a way that's a little more subtle and skillful. Right? So we could say, well, money does not necessarily induce moral degradation. Because all depends on one's attitude towards one's assets. And that links back to your stand. Do you see how everything links back now? All the pieces are like that, as I said, in the jigsaw puzzle. It all has to link up and form a complete picture. Right? What words stand out here? Moral, what's that word? Degradation. What's degradation? Yeah, to degrade. Meaning to what? No, notice, sometimes we use certain words, right? Okay, some people say deteriorate. Some people say what? To worsen. Worsen. Yes, it's along those lines. Notice, it's different from decrease, which is to lessen in terms of amount, as opposed to deteriorate, which is to lessen in terms of quality. Right? One is in terms of quantity, one is in terms of quality. And here, we're talking about the quality of one's moral character. Right? We're talking about degradation. So the process of being, well, degraded, that should be made inferior. Right? Is a sense of being worsened, indeed. Yeah? These are terms that we can employ. Right? Naturally, smoothly, not in an artificial fashion, but in an organic and spontaneous manner. Do we see how naturally, even in the way we express our thoughts about this paragraph, we are already doing this all the time? We are re-expressing the same thoughts, but in a slightly different fashion, so that it's not completely boring. Right? So this brings us then to the part about conclusions. Right? So let's have a look at this video about conclusions. How do we end that essay with a bang? Right? So that we really attract the reader and leave the reader a good impression. Right? Let's have a look.
Now, let's move on to the conclusion. Can you just copy out the question or your thesis statement in your conclusion? No. 4 things a conclusion should do. Start with a linking phrase, such as in conclusion or to sum up. Partly admit that the opposing argument is true. Restate your own opinion and say why it is important. Recommend a future action or ask a hypothetical question. The length of the conclusion is important. Don't just write one line. It should still follow the Peel structure and be the same length as the other paragraphs. Here are some good ideas for the final sentence of your essay.
Alright? So notice, these are the elements that we want to be paying attention to. Right? As you're going to conclude your essay, conceive of it, I always say, in terms of a race. It's almost as if the entire exam is a sort of marathon, right? You have to keep pacing yourself. And what does it mean to pace yourself? It means you can see the finish line ahead. You know there's about 15 minutes left in terms of the exam, right? And you want to end the essay with a bang, right? You want to tie up those loose ends. You want to check that it's all generally correct. It's quite a lot to do in that short space of time. And yet it's so near. It's like your NATFA test. Imagine, it's just there. You only have one round left. If you give up now, that's it. It's all wasted. Don't give in. Don't give up. Right? You have to continue. It's just that final lap. It's a short little sprint and then you're finally into the finish. Do you see that? You want the energy and excitement right towards the end. You want that finish line to be right in front of you. Right? Okay, so your conclusion really should, as we say, reiterate your argument. Reiterate, meaning it has to re-emphasize. Yeah? It's the sense of bringing forward the same point. And of course, providing a sense of closure. Loose ends need to be tied. It's like an essay, we could put it as, it's like a piece of fabric as well. Sometimes it's got these little frayed ends which need to be sewn up properly. Yeah? So we want to make sure that all these ends are properly dealt with. Right? Do not bring in any more points for discussion in your conclusion. This is not the time to bring in new points. This is the time for you to tie things up. Yeah? If you want to explain significance and implications, which you should, that's not really new points now, is it? Instead, you're extending the very basis of your argument, but it's the same argument, right? So which means, do avoid lifting, right? Do avoid copying out simply the very same thesis statement or stand, because that's very tempting. Sometimes if you haven't got that much time, you just feel like, okay, can I just rewrite the same thing? Can't think of more words to do it, so let's just write it the same way. The fact of the matter is, if you still have time, unless you only have like 1 or 2 minutes left in the exam, in which case then never mind, ignore this and just quickly finish it off, right? But if you still do have enough time to think, then yes, please, rephrase it. It will do your conclusion a world of good, right? Let's use our own words like that. Instead of lifting, yeah, what you should do is to link back, right? Rephrase it. So link back to your stand and talk about how it all refers to the same point, that, you know, money really isn't the root of all evil. Yeah? Because, and let's bring in those main points, yeah, in order to buttress or bolster your argument. And part of that, of course, involves referring back to the counter paragraph, the counter argument and rebuttal, because you want to partly admit that the opposing argument is true to some extent, and you're not really compromising your stand. Yeah? You're saying, yes, the other side does have a point. You're not negating that. What you're saying is, they have a gem of truth. They have an element of truth which you are giving credit to, and you have the maturity and sophistication to acknowledge that. Because all skilled writers do that. They recognize the other side of the fence, or the other side of the picture, depending on your metaphor. Right? And you want to be doing that in your own essays. Of course, part of this involves restating your opinion, which means paraphrasing your ideas. Yeah? So you want to put it again, fit it in, yeah? But without just blindly copying. And then you could recommend future action. You could suggest something new. What is it that could be pursued in future? Perhaps there could be some programs to be lined up for the sake of young people today. Or, considering these various arguments, it's certainly timely that more young people need to be more keenly aware about these issues. Do you see that whichever topic you are faced with, you can always explain the implications and significance in a similar fashion? Right? You can always talk about what this means to young people, what this means to Singapore, what this means to the very context of your essay as you phrase it. Right? So it all depends on how you frame that argument. Yeah? What are the actual phrases that we can use to begin our conclusion, for instance? Right? Well, we could refer to, very simply, to conclude. There is nothing wrong with the phrase in conclusion. There are some candidates who avoid it like the plague, and they say, sounds like very common, you know. Very common, yeah, I don't like. You know, in conclusion, I'm above that or cannot. I'm so smart, I can say in conclusion. No, actually. None of us, right, are above that. I would say, in all essays, it's perfectly legitimate to say, to conclude. Right? If you want to be a little more creative, maybe you want to say summarize, or some people refer to it in a nutshell. Right? Don't keep referring to it in a nutshell, because we realize that the metaphor of in a nutshell, some people use it without thinking. What's a nutshell, right? It's like an acorn, have you seen those? Yeah? So, in which the very oak, the mighty oak tree is contained within that little acorn. That's what we refer to in a nutshell. Yeah? Or to sum up. Yeah? Between to sum up and to conclude, the phrase to conclude or in conclusion would be more formal. Yeah? It has a certain formal ring to it. It might be more appropriate in some ways. Yeah? What else can you put in specifically? Let's speak in concrete specifics, right? Well, we could bring in a rhetorical question. Yeah? So a rhetorical question is what? Well, how do we characterize it? What do we mean by a rhetorical question? Any responses?
A question not in the
And that is not a rhetorical question. What is a rhetorical question? Yes, it doesn't require, very good Gerald, it doesn't require a response from the reader because the answer is implicit or contained within the utterance of the question. Right? So, to offer a concrete example, if we are referring to the same topic of is money the root of all evil, what's the sort of rhetorical question we can pose? Maybe, is money then intrinsically malicious? Question mark. Do you see that? Because throughout the entire essay, we have been saying and arguing, no, it's not, right? So we don't even need to answer our own questions. Please don't be like the candidate who proceeds to answer every single one of his rhetorical questions. So you say, is money the root of all evil? No! Exclamation mark. No, please avoid that, right? This is not a speech. And even if it were a speech, you really shouldn't put it like that, yeah? So you might say, is money then intrinsically malicious? This essay has established that wealth is not itself responsible for wickedness, but its effects are determined by the intentions of its users. Do you see how you weaved it in? Yeah? Just by saying that. You brought a rhetorical question and it allows you to link back. Yeah? Now, aside from a rhetorical question, which you don't necessarily have to bring in, you could if you wished. All these are just tools in your big writer's toolkit. You can bring in a spanner, you can bring in a hammer, but, well, you want to use the right tools. If you want to bring in a rhetorical question, you could, depending on the context. Yeah? You could also bring in, well, reflections. Why not? Some personal reflections. Yes, alternatively, you might want to shed new insights. That's the idea. Shed new light upon it, right? Upon the same topic. Personal reflections. So, what might you say in terms of personal reflections? Say, connected with the topic. Because you don't want to make it sound like it's a new point, right? But rather an extension of the very points you have been raising. You could bring it in as a bit of an afterthought. You might say, well, in terms of, say, the same topic, right? Indeed, it would be beneficial for our society in the long run if more individuals were aware of the potential hazards that money could trigger. But that's possible as a kind of reflection. Yeah? We see that these kinds of personal responses and reflections are not new points. You are saying the same thing, but it's just that you're personalizing it. Right? So let's look at conclusions in terms of a sample. Right? Can we begin like this, ladies and gentlemen? Can we begin like this? In conclusion, money is not the root of all evil. This is because money, oh goodness. Why? Why? What has this candidate done?
He lifts.
Lifting, yes, that is the precise sin of lifting that we just cautioned against, right? So no, let's not begin like that. Assuming we've practiced proper time management and we've got enough time, we want to think and we want to write it well, right? So we want to say, instead of that, well, in conclusion, yeah, money is not inherently malicious. But then, and here what we're doing, we are bringing in what ideas? The same, actually is the main ideas of all the body paragraphs that we have been referring to. Have you noticed that? Yes, right, your topic sentences actually. Your topic sentences which have supported the thesis statement, understand? Right, so for example, but simply a means to facilitate the efficient exchange of value. That's one point, right? Remember yesterday we were referring to how seashells, for example, are used. Or not are used, but rather were used as a form of currency in the past. Before gold and silver, and now paper money, right, or plastic or whatever you have, right? The point is that in the past you had different forms of currency, and this is the point, all contained within this one phrase, right? Simply a means to facilitate the efficient exchange of value, meaning, so these terms are specific terms, right? It's almost like it's exact terminology, to facilitate, to make it easier, yes? To make that sense of exchange easier, so you're not always having to resort to barter. Yeah? You're not saying, okay, I've got a chicken, you've got a bag of rice, can we switch now? No, you don't have to do all of that now. It facilitates that efficient exchange. And can even be employed for humanitarian purposes to support the less fortunate. Remember yesterday's point that Tinchen mentioned about money being used to do good, right? To do good to whom? To society, right? For beneficial purposes. Yes? So that's what you want. You want your stand and main points reiterated, but rephrased. This is the key. Reiterated, but rephrased. Yes? And then you can bring the rest in. You can say, when used for the welfare of society in general, money makes an invaluable tool, but if people are enslaved to it, dire consequences may result. So notice, even in these terms we've employed, we are saying nothing new. It's the same idea. We're saying that money is useful if you know how to use it. The point is that you're not used by money, right? You're using money. Wealth is not that malicious force that's controlling you if you don't let it control you. It's ultimately your choice, because we've got free will, for example, right? So you see, you're implicitly saying all of that, yeah? Dire consequences. These are the sorts of terms you might wish to employ. Yeah? Instead of saying, bad things may happen. Well, yes, I know, right? Yes, bad things happen all the time, it's a pity. Yeah? But here, we are referring to the possibility of dire consequences. Yeah? We want to be explaining those implications. And then, we can finally conclude the conclusion. Please do not use that phrase in your essays. There are some candidates who, and you can see, they're just panicking because they've got that one last minute, and they're saying, to conclude my conclusion, as the last sentence. There's no need to put it like that, right? You don't need to say that. And a very suitable word might be ultimately. We could just say, ultimately, money is a good servant, but a bad master. Is that different from that which we just mentioned? No, it's the same idea. We're just rephrasing it. It's a good servant, but a bad master, and it is up to individuals to decide whether their money contributes to the common good or leads to immoral outcomes. Yeah? Because here, we are tying it all together. We are saying that here is our summation of the argument. Right? We're putting it all in. So notice how this entire conclusion is not even that long. Yeah? It's just that one block. And it's almost got a bit of a pew structure as well. Yeah? You've got your main point that, in conclusion, this is what I have to say. And then you're extending it with a little bit of elaboration, and then you link it back. It's also got a pew structure. Realize? Yeah? Okay, now, with this, any questions about conclusions per se? If we're alright, we are going to move on to editing. Right? Yes. Well, okay, that seemed a bit anticlimactic. Alright, yes, editing. That's what we keep thinking. Editing is not that important. No, it is. It is important, right? It's a vital part of any essay writing process. Because we want to be checking the quality of the language, right? And how well we've achieved those tasks. So let's have a look at this next video.
So how can you remember what to check? Try reverse habit. Start from the bottom and work your way up. Check the content first. Content, organisation, vocabulary, accuracy, hedging. Check that your essay has all the key content elements. It's important to make sure that your thesis statement and topic sentences link and answer the question. Conjunctions organise your ideas and link your paragraphs together. This will get you marks for good organisation and cohesion. They also steer your reader through your argument like signposts. Remember that and, but, so, and because go in the middle of sentences, not at the start. Make sure you always indent the first sentence of a paragraph to make it clear that you are writing about a new idea. Using a variety of vocabulary is important too. If you keep using the same words, it is unlikely to be interesting to read. An examiner will most likely conclude that you have a poor vocabulary range and mark you down. It's always a good idea to check your grammar thoroughly for accuracy. Make sure you include the basics like spelling and punctuation, and don't use short forms such as I'd, can't, and I've in formal writing.
Alright, so let's pay attention to all these stylistic points, right? Have we heard of the acronym before? Anyone? No, we haven't heard of it. Well then it's quite interesting, isn't it? We don't want our essay to end up in chaos, like havoc, right? So let's reverse that process. So reverse havoc, how we act. Yes? So in terms of content, let's make sure that yes, the essay has substance, all the key ideas are there. We want to make sure that we've got all the main ideas all properly signposted. Beginning of each paragraph. 1, 2, 3, all nice and signposted, right? Clear like that. And then of course, organization. Check that all your statements are linked. You haven't brought in any statements in an abrupt fashion, right? And then in terms of vocabulary, you want to try to vary it, yeah? Not to change it in a fashion that will make it sound awkward, yeah? Or make it sound bombastic. That's not the point. The point is to be precise, yeah? So you want to employ that wide range of words. And then in terms of accuracy, as mentioned earlier, spelling, grammar, punctuation, all that should be under control by now, right? Let's not use contractions, and yes, I know for some candidates, I'm afraid spelling is still a bit of an issue, isn't it? Yeah. But these are matters we can try to address on our own. Yeah. So let's not use short forms, right? And of course, hedging. Now let's ascertain and check that we're not making any sweeping statements, right? So we've mentioned hedging before. Your teachers have said this. Use all those qualifiers, right? Like maybe, probably, likely, sometimes. Or else your modal verbs, this could be the case, might be, or maybe. Let's just have a quick view of this video to remind us slightly.
Check you've not made any sweeping statements. If we always state something with 100% confidence, it often weakens our argument. If you're not sure of a fact, an outcome, or point of view of a group of people, then say so. You can do this in 2 ways. By using maybe, probably, likely, or sometimes. Or by using modal verbs such as could, might, and may. They make your content and argument stronger because your points will sound more realistic.
Right? That's the point we want to emphasize. You want to sound realistic. You're not making all these big, grandiose, sweeping statements. So if you look at those essays later, right, in your own time, in Annex 2 and 3, you will find all these phrases concerning hedging have been cleverly inserted. And that's what we want to do as well with our own essays, right? So just in terms of points of style, let's be reminded that you want to indent those new paragraphs, leave a line between paragraphs, yeah? So it should be evident for the reader, yeah? It seems minor, but sometimes it really allows the essay to look a lot more readable, and we want to give the examiner a good impression, yeah? And then, apart from that, other pointers, quality, I would say, matters more than quantity. It's not about the length of it. Some of the sample essays you've been provided are a little longer. Well, that's because the candidate has managed to write that to that level of depth within the limited amount of time, yeah, without compromising on quality. Yeah? But as far as possible, there's really no need to exceed the number of words by too much. Yeah? Really, all you ask for is between how many and how many words?
350, 500.
Yes, 350 to 500. Yeah? So sometimes the more you write, the more you expose yourself to being caught for errors. So let's just beware of that. Yeah? Now, let's also think out of the box. Yeah? Let's ask ourselves, how can my ideas stand out from others? You don't want to be completely unorthodox to the extent that you're being seen as, well, to put it in a rather informal fashion, wacko, right? No, you don't want that. Yeah? You don't want to be seen as a complete lunatic. No. But the point is, you want to be a little less than conventional. Right? Maybe you've got a new twist on things. And that could be legitimate. Right? So let's try to bring that in. Okay, now we're going to go on to Q&A, right? So yesterday, some of these very, very pertinent questions have come in. And let's have a look at those. Yeah? Two main questions. So for example, the first one. How do you incorporate all 3 points in the introduction without making it too wordy? That's quite legitimate. Yeah? To answer that, let's think. What do we need to do in the introduction? Yes, we need to.
Thesis statement.
Come again?
Thesis statement.
Yes, with our thesis statement and all the rest. So that means your stand should just condense your argument, right? You want to bring it in clearly but succinctly. So all you have to do is just condense your points. Condense your points. So instead of giving lots and lots of elaboration, we're not asking for 1 point per sentence in the introduction. You're saying 1 phrase per point. That's more like it. Yeah? And these phrases, let's look at samples in order to clarify matters. You might say, say with the same topic, money is the root of all evil, do you agree? You might say, well, I argue that money is not the root of all evil because it is a mere medium of exchange. Mere medium of exchange, that's 1 point. It can be used for beneficial purposes. Beneficial purposes, that's 1 point. That's all you need. Move on. What you're telling the reader is, I'm going to be talking about this, so do keep a lookout for it, it's going to be good. That's what you're implicitly saying. You're not actually literally saying that. You're not writing that down, right? But you are suggesting that, right? Let's look at another example. If you turn to Annex 3, yeah, you will see a different topic. And this one, we need a separate session to go through in proper detail. But in the context of this, let's just look only at this one section of a paragraph. If you look just at the first paragraph, right? So, although some might assume that work demands toil and drudgery, I would disagree with the statement that we can, quote, only enjoy our leisure but not our work. This topic might be about leisure versus work, right? And not so much leisure versus work per se, but can we only enjoy leisure and we have to detest work? Yeah? Is that necessarily the case? So, well, we can just put our points succinctly in terms of mere phrases. So you might say, personally, I believe that our labor can actually be satisfying and enjoyable. And that's your stand. Your stand is in that one phrase. We see that. Yeah? In addition, it's just adding on to the previous part. Yeah? And then as long as we, and there's 1 point coming up, pursue the occupation suited for us, 1 down, tap on the support of friends, another down, and adopt a positive attitude towards work. We're done. So, do we see how it's possible to succinctly draw our points together? Yes? Now, there was another question that was offered. Can I make up my own proverbs, facts, and statistics?
No.
What do you think?
Statistics can.
Yeah, You see, my response is this, alright? My response is this. Why do you need to? I don't understand. I mean, because there's so many facts out there. There's so many proverbs and analogies and examples and observations that you could be making. Why do you need to make it up? Right? Because remember, yeah, I know there's a sense of abiding security in us. Maybe I don't know that much. Right? That's not that's not an insurmountable challenge. Because you can always endow yourself with this knowledge. Right? And you can do that by reading widely. In fact, that's the only method. Yeah? And if you haven't got that much time because you're in Sec 4 or Sec 5, right? How much time? You only got a few months left. Actually, less than that. Right? Then what can you do? Model essays. That's one way. Yeah? You focus on certain key kinds of texts. Yeah? And I'm not just restricting you to model essays. I'm not saying you shouldn't read other sources. Continue to read all those magazines and newspapers. Those are really beneficial. Yeah? Your in section in the Straits Times, that's actually quite helpful. Yeah? You can really accumulate all these examples in your mental bank and then draw upon it when the occasion arises. You never know when you suddenly need it. Yeah? So now in summary, yeah? And by the way, before we tie everything together, as far as this lecture is concerned, do we have any questions? The floor is open. Any questions? Because if not, then let's go on to the summary. And if you suddenly think of it, you can always address it right after the session. Yeah? Just come and speak to me. I'm open to that. Yeah? I would argue, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Although writing argumentative essays, what am I saying? Argumentative essays might seem mechanical. Yeah? It might seem difficult. It might seem, why must have all this structure? Very annoying. Well, and you might think about someone who actually made that literal comment, yeah, to me. Right? Well, what I would say is, we've got to get used to it. Because the nature of argumentation relies upon structure. And structure is that which allows us to make sense, to make logical sense, and to be utterly convincing. Yeah? And you can train it. This is a skill. It might be a skill that you haven't yet attained, but remember, I emphasize the term yet. Right? It's always an ongoing process. And you can do it. Right? The fact that you bothered to even attend this lecture, that demonstrates a certain level of tenacity and a certain willingness to learn. Right? So, I emphasize, you can become a confident, effective communicator of ideas. This portion is crucial. It's part of you. You just need to hone that natural talent. Right? And before we conclude our conclusion, right? Use that awful phrase. Or rather, let's just summarize. Let me leave you with these words. Some of these favorite words of mine by Alexander Pope, right? From the 18th century. He said, true ease in writing comes from art, not chance, as those who move easiest have learned to dance. So what does that mean? Well, how to dance? I don't know how to dance. That's not the point! Was it Andre? Oh, it wasn't. Oh well. Why that voice emanates from that corner, that's why. Right? Well, the thing is this. Right? It's just like, have you noticed that people who dance well, it's just a matter of practice. Yeah? They might have some natural aptitude, but then they build on it only with practice. Yeah? And then eventually, you see that utter fluidity of movement with such grace and skill that beggars belief. Right? We can do that with writing. We can do that, and it's not a matter of chance or luck. It's not, I'm so lucky I can write. No. It's because you practice. It's because you've read. And that's how we become effective writers. Alright? And so with this, I would like to wish you all the best in your argumentative essay writing. And this concludes this two-part lecture series. Thank you very much.